If there were any remaining doubts that the 2024 election has flipped on its head, consider this. Legendary Republican pollster Frank Luntz is now publicly sounding the alarm, saying that between polls and focus groups, if the election were held today, Vice President Harris would defeat Donald Trump, and he is in serious danger. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Again, just more bad news for Donald Trump and the Republican Party, which means good news for the rest of us, good news for America, good news for Democrats, liberals, progressives, and basically anybody who values democracy. Frank Luntz is a legendary Republican pollster who has featured in numerous videos of mine in the past. I disagree with Frank Luntz on a lot of things, not so much like polls and analysis, but definitely like the fact that he loves to grade Republicans on a curve and is very, very harsh on Democrats. Well, he is sounding the alarm in multiple interviews about results from polling that he has done and focus groups. You're going to see some of it, but it is bad news for Trump.
Pollster and communication strategist Frank Luntz just held a focus group. Watch this.
How many of you were supporting Joe Biden 14 days ago? Raise your hands. None of you. How many of you, if the election were held today, would vote for the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris?
I would.
Okay, that's all of you.
None of you to all of you. And Frank Luntz is with us now. Frank, thank you so much for being with us. Let me just ask you, if the election were held today, who would win?
She would win. And I want to emphasize, it's not just about momentum. And I thought your commentary just before this was dead on. It's also about passion. It's about commitment. And Harris voters are even more eager to vote for her than Donald Trump voters are to him. We've not seen that in the entire campaign. Call that intensity. And her campaign is generating the intensity. And another key component is exactly why this is happening. She's talking and emphasizing her persona, her attributes, her character traits. And that's where Donald Trump has been commenting. And the fact is, the American people do not want to hear the same kind of negativity, the same kind of attacks that he's been delivering. His strength is on issues. Most particularly the two issues that matter most, inflation and immigration. But instead of speaking about those two issues and talking about the failures of the Biden administration, he's been making these personal attacks, and it's frankly turning the voters off that he needs to reach. Now, I want to emphasize.
So we'll get some more clips. As a matter of fact, about to play one from Frank Luntz. But again, notice that, folks, swing voters, former Republican voters saying that none of them would have voted for President Biden, and all of them would vote for Vice President Harris. All of them. That is a staggering swap. That is a staggering transition that Donald Trump cannot afford to have. And the election is 3 months away. The election is not today. So that's good news for Trump, I suppose, in that it gives him time to course correct. But the trajectory is awful for him. And you and I, and those of us who support Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, have an obligation to keep that momentum up. Okay, but this is disastrous for Trump, especially coming from a pollster and strategist as reputable as Frank Luntz. Another clip from Luntz from a different interview.
Yeah, I want to listen to one of your focus groups. We have a clip. This is a Republican voter who's considering Vice President Harris. So let's listen to that.
For me, it's more of an issue with Donald Trump and the options that are now available. I would not have voted for Joe Biden. I'm a Republican, but I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, and I did not like Joe Biden. With him gone, Harris is a better option than Donald Trump, in my opinion.
Why is that?
As much as I disagree with some of her policies, I think that the country is headed in the right direction, and under Donald Trump, it would not be headed in the correct direction.
It's really interesting. I don't know enough about that voter. Maybe he was what we would consider a double hater, Frank, the people that didn't like Trump and didn't like Biden. But we have seen movement in Harris's direction in those types of people. But his particular sentiment that he was just talking about, did you hear that often?
Yes, let me clarify this. If this is an issue-based campaign, Trump still has the advantage. Not only am I not calling him out, she is winning right now. She is absolutely ahead. But we have ups and downs. This lead will go back and forth. But remember, this is happening before the convention. She's going to get a bounce from that convention, and she's getting pre-convention bounce. If it's about issues, Trump is much more likely to be successful. If it's about attributes, Harris is much more likely to be successful because, quite frankly, people like her more than they like him. It's something that if he's watching this.
So this is something that's really important, and I feel vindicated, as I'm sure many of you all do as well. So Donald Trump does enjoy a perception advantage on certain issues, certainly immigration, although that's questionable, and the economy. We'll talk about that in a second. I mentioned it in a previous video. But when it comes to attributes like intelligence, mental fitness, trustworthiness, does the candidate care about people like you? If you look at the polls, Donald Trump lags behind on these issues. Donald Trump is seen as less mentally fit for office, less physically fit for office, too old for office, too dishonest for office, too corrupt for office. She enjoys a colossal advantage in these areas, and she should continue to press them. But again, Frank Luntz iterates that if the election were held today, Vice President Harris would win. That is a staggering reversal from where the election was 3 weeks ago, and Donald Trump continues to go off message. He continues to flail and flounder. I'll play another clip from Frank in just a second, but I also want to remind you, we did a video about this, but the Financial Times had a pretty reputable poll. I mean, they're a pretty reputable pollster, period. And we did a video about this, but they released the results of a staggering poll, which shows that the vice president is beating Donald Trump by 1 percentage point. So it's within the margin of error, and it could easily be reversed on the economy. And you heard from the swing voter that Frank interviewed. He's like, listen, I wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden. I'm a Republican, but you know what? I think the country is getting better. And I think if Trump were in power, he would actually make it worse. And apparently that seems to reflect to the economy. Republicans have enjoyed decades of perception advantage on the economy, even though the record shows that the macroeconomic metrics of the American economy tends to perform better when you have a Democrat in the White House compared to a Republican. But set that aside, they have enjoyed an enormous perception advantage. And it's perceptions, feelings, ultimately that drive polls. Facts don't matter unless you're able to parlay those facts into a persuasive narrative. We have failed to do so usually for the Democratic Party. And yet, despite all of that, this shows that Donald Trump is vulnerable on the issue which generally matters most to most Americans, the economy. As Frank said, Frank referred to inflation, but that's a subset of the economy. He responded to this. He says, so far, this poll is a big outlier. But if it's anywhere near accurate, it shows a serious erosion of trust in Donald Trump since Vice President Kamala Harris entered the race. And again, folks, we can't take that for granted. We need to make sure it's not an outlier by continuing to press our advantage and make the case that the vice president, Governor Walz, and Democrats would be better stewards of the economy than Donald Trump. The facts are on our side. We just have to, you and I and everybody else, the vice president, all of us at every level, have to persuasively make the case and keep voters energized. One more clip from Frank Luntz.
Let's talk about the Harris side for a second, because you talk about the excitement and enthusiasm. One of the things that she and her running mate are leaning into is this idea of joy. How does joy rate in your focus groups? Is there anything you can see where that's having an impact?
It's not joy. It's the absence of meanness. And I want to be specific about this. It's not that she's so energetic and so, which is part of it. The people in the focus groups appreciate that. It's that they've stopped appreciating the same kind of attacks again and again, year after year, that Donald Trump delivers. Frankly, and now let me upset everyone here, it's not that she's winning this campaign, it's that Donald Trump is losing the campaign. And I'm starting to wonder, how does he not see this? How does he not see the polling decline that he's had? How did he not read and understand that people were fed up with a 93-minute convention speech that was really great for the first 30 minutes and got really awful at the end? We are different people than we were when he was first elected. We are a different country in 2024 than we were in 2016. And I don't think that he understands it. Last point, I don't think it's his campaign, because I see the stuff that they put out. I think it's actually the candidate that's responsible for this.
Look at all the reports.
Thank God somebody else said it. Thank God. Again, this is a legendary Republican pollster and strategist who is respected by most Republicans in elected office because they recognize his talents. And he is the only one on the Republican side that I've seen who is willing to tell the truth that it's not Donald Trump's advisors. Based on every indication, the Trump campaign has been more expertly, professionally managed, certainly than the 2020 campaign and even the 2016 campaign as well. The only difference, the common denominator of failure, is the candidate, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is too stupid. He's too narcissistic. He's too uncurious. He's too ignorant. He's too unchanging. He's too static. He's too aggressive. He's too offensive. He is too much of everything that people dislike to change. The problem is with him. And this is why MAGA Republicans will continue to flounder until they find the courage and the rhetoric to convince Trump that, hey, you're the problem and you need to change. We're good. We're smarter than you. We're better than you. You need to listen to us being Republicans, and follow our advice accordingly. But for those of us on the left, those of us who are liberals, progressives, aligned with the Democratic coalition, this is great news. This is great news that Donald Trump is so recalcitrant that he's not heeding the wisdom of his very shrewd campaign advisors. And right now, it's paying dividends. The momentum is clearly on the side of the vice president and Governor Walz, and the likelihood is increasing. It is not certain because the election is not today, but the likelihood is increasing that Vice President Harris will become the 47th president of the United States. So let's keep that energy and momentum and hype and fundraising and polling up. And you let me know what you think in the comments.